Welcome to the third episode of Swaraj for Cities. We welcome you all heartily. Today's topic is on the uh, proposal of 74th Amendment to decentralize planning, which is to take it to ground level, such as areas and wards, and what it proposes is a ground up planning structure. But apparently, this is not being done. It's 30 years since the amendment was passed in Parliament. So, even if we did, we have uh, like we have a lot of concerns as to how this will actually uh, materialize in the real world, because on an average, citizens generally are not even aware about the width of the roads or facilities that are required in their wards or things like that. So, will that sort of literacy actually come into commonplace so that citizens can actually take on this responsibility of delivering ward level planning? This is at the core of today's discussion. We have a wonderful panel with us today. Uh, Two of them are planners, one is into development, one is a citizen activist, one is into the development space. Before we start with the webinar, I would welcome Mr. Kirti Shah to set the tone and make an introduction. Kirti bhai, would you please?
But Sunai Din, I think I'm not able to hear you well. I think I don't know if this.
Can you hear? Is everybody else able to hear me?
Uh, Still more.
Yes.
Okay.
Kirti bhai, you can please speak.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear? I mean,
Yeah, I think I can hear you now.
okay. No, I just made an introduction. I don't know if you missed that. I was welcoming you to make the introduction, please, Kirti bhai.
Yeah, I think. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
I can hear you and see you. Yes.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay,
You are
I can't
visible
hear
and
me.
audible. Yes.
I can't see me. Okay, doesn't matter. But it's okay. So I think the second welcome, and that was from Sandeep, and this is from me to friends and colleagues, and welcome to the episode third of the series called Swaraj for Cities. And as he mentioned, today's subject is decentralizing planning. And I think, if you really go detail, it says building planning capacity at the ward and area levels to localize the sustainable development goals. So I think the reason this makes this particular meeting very interesting, because we're not talking about the broad theme, we're talking about how do you take this entire thing on the ground. And I think, I'm sure we'll hear lots of innovations. I also must remind you that this is, and I'm sure most of you know, that this is 94th webinar of the series titled Rethinking City, that INHAF and many of its partners have been running for close to last 2 years. Swaraj for Cities is a special series within the overall framework of the webinar series Rethinking City. And this particular one, I must mention, this has been co-organized by 5 organizations, namely, of course, INHAF, Citizens Agenda for Bangalore, Praja. They're trying to make development, democracy work, Civic, and Making Model Gurgaon. So these are the 5 organizations which are doing this particular series together. I should also mention that this is the third episode of the series. The last episode, second, was organized as a hybrid event in Bangalore on 12th August. And it focused on urban governance in Karnataka. And I must say it was a very lively and educative event. Before I hand this over to Sandeep Bhai to conduct this webinar, I must do two things. One is I must first thank all the four participants, who, despite their very busy schedule, are here. And this includes Kathyayini ji, this includes Avinash Madhale, Shreya ji, and Smita ji. So thank you very much, all of you. And of course, Sandeep Bhai for being here. What I'm trying to do is to introduce you now to what are we doing? Why are we doing this webinar series for the last 2 years? What are we trying to achieve? What, as a matter of fact, I don't really have the time, but I would have liked to share in terms of what have we done in the last 2 years, but because there is not enough time, let me tell you what is this INHAF webinar series on rethinking city and why we are doing it. And I think I must share with you a couple of thought processes which has led to this particular series. It is a reflection on the urbanization process in the country. It is on how we see cities, their development, their growth, and their current status, and what can we do about that. So essentially, I'll summarize this in few statements, and that is one, that despite being engines of growth and centers for culture, technology, knowledge, and global attention and investment, our cities, the Indian cities, are not in pink of health. They are not very healthy. And it's not only about the metropolitan cities. It could be big or small, industrial or commercial, district town or state capital. Across the board, the health of the cities is not great. And when you talk about health of the city, it could be environment, it could be water, it could be governance, it could be planning, it could be slums, it could be housing, it could be rivers, it could be climate change. All of them essentially are problematic, and therefore our cities are saddled with major challenges. This is the first sort of point of consideration when we started working on this idea. The second, which is equally, in fact, more important, because the first one describes what the problems are. The second one talks about why it doesn't appear that we know what to do with this problem. So cities, as they are and the way they are growing and developing, do not look like meeting the challenge of unprecedented urbanization India is witnessing. It neither looks like providing safe and healthy quality of living to some 840 million people who will be there in our cities in 30 more years by 2050. And they also do not look like delivering 7 to 8% economic growth the country expects to get rid of its poverty and emerge as an economic superpower. The second thing is this, that not only we have ill health and we don't have other problem, we also do not look like, we do not seem to have tools, we do not have solutions, we do not have answers to the problems that we have. That's a second conclusion. The third is this, it's not that nothing is happening. A lot is happening. And especially the government effort alone, and government is making enormous amount of effort, be that smart cities, be that PMAY, be that, sanitation program, 100 million toilets in the country. So government is making a lot of effort, but it doesn't look adequate enough to ensure healthy, livable, productive, inclusive, and sustainable cities. This is the third part. And the fourth, the hopeful part, the raison d'etre of this entire effort is that the wider society, the human capital outside the government system, has the required skills, knowledge, experience, and even motivation to contribute meaningfully in search for alternative approaches and new solutions. And therefore, this particular webinar series is a part of a wider national societal effort aimed to bringing not only fresh ideas and new perspectives, but also new voices and new collectivism, new togetherness, new partnership, and new energy in articulating the need for and ways to rethinking our cities. And that's why we call this rethinking our cities. We need to redefine our urban challenge, and we must find more effective ways to addressing that challenge. So that is the larger sort of a picture. And this entire series, which we're running for the last 2 years, and this is the 94th episode, it is meant to build a societal partnership to deal with the major daunting urban challenge. And to meet this challenge in a manner where we ensure better cities, livable cities, healthy cities, productive cities, and people-friendly cities. So that is the challenge within which this entire effort is put together. And we essentially have broken into parts, themes and sub-themes. And Swaraj for cities is one of those themes. The governance part of the whole cities is one big sub-theme and a very important one. So with that sort of introduction, I hand over this to people, to the anchor, and to the panelists to conduct this session and share with us their understanding, perspectives, knowledge, and solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirti Bhai, for setting a very broad context for the discussion. Am I very clearly audible?
Now, yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So, as we start on the webinar, I would like to begin with Kathyayini Madam because Kathyayini represents the citizen voice. She's been a civic activist and a citizen activist for most of her life, and she largely represents civic society in all her engagements with the government. What I'd like to uh, understand is, Kathyayini Madam, as you would look at this whole context of planning from a total different view from what maybe an architect or a planner who deals with things from a very spatial perspective. I think the primary concerns for you would be social equity, social justice, and about fairness, about livability, and things like that. So, would you please share your thoughts initially? In fact, the format we're following in this webinar is every panelist will initially share a broad perspective on what they think about this topic, and later we will go into a free flowing discussion. Kathy, madam, would you like to start off?
Yeah, good evening to all my co-panelists and Mr. Kirti ji and also anchor Sandeep. And thank you for this opportunity. And I also am very grateful for all the participants who have joined, more than 50 of them. So I would like to go straight into my presentation, if you don't mind. because otherwise I'll be taking too much time of the others. Yeah.
No, no,
So
please.
shall I?
Are you able to share, or do you need one of us to share it?
I'll share it. I'll share it because uh, let me
So
try.
I thought it's best to start with the citizen voice, because ultimately, whatever planning we do has to meet the citizens' requirements. So
Okay. Thank you for that. I'll try to share my screen. Just a minute. Are you able to see the
it's
slideshow?
not in slideshow mode, it is in the editing mode.
I'm clicking on
Ujjwala,
it,
will
but
you be able to
not
help, madam? I think it's at bottom. At the bottom there is a menu.
at the
Uh,
bottom.
Bottom right, yeah. There's that screen symbol. If you click on that, it becomes a presentation.
Kathyayini ji, right at the bottom right of your screen,
Bottom right of the screen.
there is a
This
sliding
one?
scale. No, there's a sliding scale next to that on the left.
Yeah, just left of the
This
slider.
one?
Yeah,
Right where you're
yeah.
next to
Next to it. Next to it on the left, there is a screen
there's a
This
symbol.
one?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah,
Oh, okay. My God,
perfect.
so many
Yeah,
things to learn. Okay.
fantastic. We're
You're
all good.
able to see it now.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I'll be focusing on ward level planning for meeting the Sustainable Development Goal, which is the theme for today. And is the heading visible?
Yes. It's very clear, madam.
Yeah. So what we are, though it is now 30 years after the 74th Amendment, and we are so fortunate to be celebrating this anniversary, but it's really unfortunate that we have not been begun, uh, you know, issuing any guidelines for ward level planning, even after 30 years. Okay. So in the 74th Amendment, the district level planning was supposed to happen and not at the central level or the state level. It was supposed to be decentralized. And for the metros like Bengaluru, there was supposed to be a metropolitan planning committee. And for the other areas, it was supposed to be the district planning committees. And but the plans were to be made for economic development and social justice. That was the chief function of the third tier of government as per the 74th Amendment. But what we see even today after 30 years is that plans are being made only for roads, drains, and garbage, maybe, but not for economic development and social justice. That seems to be forgotten. And both the district planning committees and the metropolitan planning committees have been kept, very sketchy and dysfunctional. And the MPC or the DPC was supposed to issue guidelines for the ward level planning by municipalities and the metros. And because they have been kept dysfunctional, we don't have the guidelines how to go about doing ward level planning. So what I would like to focus on is that there is a need for having a database of citizens at ward level before you can think of doing any planning. And in Karnataka, we have had the Department of Personnel and Administrative Reforms, which has developed what is called a family ID for every family in Karnataka. And it is called Kutumba, and it is a digitized database of over 1 crore families and covering more than 5.5 crore persons. And it enables the computer itself to identify eligible citizens for various schemes. And what I'm suggesting is that the census or the socio-economic census data should be integrated with the family ID data and the property ID of the family, and it should be available at the ward level. And of course, in the rural area, it would be available at the Gram Panchayat level as the basis for planning at the most decentralized level. And this single database should be continuously updated. It should not become outdated. And the birth and death and in and out migration of citizens from the area should also be captured there in a continuous basis. But currently, this family ID data is being collected in a voluntary way. But we know that in many other countries, registration is compulsory at the local level, so that there's a continuously updated database. Uh, Without the database, I don't think it's possible to do any planning. So, and and also currently there's no evidence-based data of existing facilities and the gaps and deficits in the status of human development, social infrastructure, ecological sustainability in a ward to serve as the basis for ward development planning. So we need the data not only for the individual citizens, but also for developing a ward human development index, a social infrastructure index, and the sustainability index. And we need to develop a toolkit for ward development planning, to encompass all these requirements. So that is the need of the hour. And yeah, so I'm saying that in addition to the individual deficits in the, uh, you know, uh, 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 entitlements to schemes of the government, we need to identify the infrastructure deficits to be identified at the ward level if we have to fulfill social infrastructure norms. So I'm just saying that there may be an Anganwadi, but does it meet the infrastructure need for full daycare of young children? Does the primary school have all the classrooms, teachers, toilets, and so on? Primary healthcare center, does it have the doctors? Are there vocational training centers, facilities for vendors, homes for the homeless? And does the housing situation meet the needs of decent and dignified living of the marginalized or the temporary migrants or informal workers? So this is the social infrastructure deficit that also needs to be identified along with the individual entitlements. And what I'm proposing is that, very nicely, the Rural Development Ministry of Panchayat Raj has developed these guidelines for the Gram Panchayat planning. And I must say they have done a very good job. And we can, adapt this to the urban area is what I'm proposing. And the whole thing is entitled as Mission Antyodaya. That means meeting the last person in the, Gram Panchayat or the ward. So, and they have also clearly shown how a database for planning and assessing the gaps for evidence-based planning in rural areas can be developed. And so it was proposed in 2017-18 already in the union budget. And it requires an annual survey to be conducted in Gram Panchayats across the country. And it is part of the People's Plan campaign of the Panchayat Raj Ministry, and it enables evidence-based participatory planning for the Gram Panchayat Development Plan. It's in short called GPDP. And the survey data is used to assess the gap in each Gram Panchayat and villages in terms of infrastructure, access to basic amenities, and overall socio-economic and human development. And these gaps have to be addressed in the Gram Panchayat development plan. So it is very kind of scientifically designed, and they have also proposed that these are the steps to be taken to do Gram Panchayat development planning. There has to be a facilitating team identifying various stakeholders who should be involved in the planning, and the team has to be built with civil society, with the citizens, with women's groups or youth group representatives, and environment building has to be done to mobilize the citizens. Awareness raising has to happen to tell them what is all this plan about, and also they have to be awareness has to be built on which are the focus areas that they are going to take up, and the data collection has to happen to arrive at a situation analysis, and a development status report has to be developed by this team, and uh, this development status report has to be presented at a Gram Sabha, and a visioning exercise has to be done, and the Gram Sabha has to identify the prioritization of needs, and the government has to provide the resources envelope. That is, what is the amount of resources being given to the Gram Panchayat. Then the Gram Sabha has to be organized, and this preparation of the draft plan has to be presented there. And then the Gram Sabha has to finalize the Gram Panchayat development plan, uh, and that has to be finalized at a comprehensive special Gram Sabha. And the Gram Sabha has to classify the gaps in 3 broad categories, because they are supposed to prepare a 5-year development plan, a perspective plan. So everything may not be accomplished in the first year itself. So they have to identify which is the critically important issue that needs to be taken up in the first year, and what is of high priority and what is desirable. So these 3 categories can be spread over the 5 years to meet the outcomes at the end of 5 years. So if a person has been elected to the Gram Panchayat at the beginning of a year, then we can study what outcomes he has achieved at the end of 5 years in the Gram Panchayat. So what I'm saying is, why can't we extend this mission Antyodaya to urban areas? It currently is only applying to rural areas. And so, because in the municipal ward, we have no guidelines, and we need to develop a municipal ward development plan. And right now, what is happening in Bengaluru, for instance, ad hoc plans are being developed, which are not looking at the comprehensive ward plan. Some NGOs may be suggesting what they want on their road, but it does not give a integrated and prioritized plan for the entire ward. And it doesn't fulfill the requirements of a comprehensive evidence-based planning exercise to meet the most critical needs of the marginalized in the ward, and the human development and social infrastructure deficits in the ward. And there is no link to localizing the achievement of the sustainable development goals in the urban area. So this is a requirement that we need to fulfill. And so I'm just summarizing that we have to have registration of citizens as mandatory at the ward level, create a single citizen database, which can be accessed by all the departments. Right now, each department has their own database, which has no coherence with the database of other departments. So we need to have a single database, which is continuously updated, and conduct annual survey of the ward, and identify the deficits, and conduct ward sabhas to prepare the evidence-based participatory ward development plan. So I'll just go through some of the sustainable development goals on which we need to develop the database. I won't go into the details. We can share this later, I think, with everybody. So we have to work on making sure there's no poverty in the ward. And these are some of the items that we would need to develop a database on. How many households are coming under the poverty line, and how many are eligible for various government schemes. That Kutumba database should tell us who are the people who are eligible for various schemes, and so who is not receiving any kind of social security scheme or skilling, and who are the elderly or the physically challenged people who need social assistance, and I mean, I'm just giving a sample. And SDG 2 is about ending hunger. So we need to know how many have been left out of the ration cards. This is the deficit that we need to identify in the ward. And how many are eligible for Anna Antodaya, Anna Yojana, and how many have been given maybe general ration card instead of a priority household card. And of course, the level of malnourishment in the ward, and how many are not going to Anganwadi, how many are not getting the take-home uh, food, and so on. So I don't want to go into too much of details. So sustainable goal 3 is about good health and well-being. What is the MMR and IMR in the ward, and how many diseases are prevalent in the ward, and so quality education. What is the net enrollment rate? How many dropouts are there? And are the SC, STs, OBCs, minorities getting their scholarships? Who are the ones who are not getting? How many children are out of school? And for the migrant workers' children, how many are not going to school? We need to identify that. Then clean water and sanitation is goal number 6. And in this, I'd like to emphasize that affordable water connection. Now, the UNDP has developed habitat indicators, very detailed ones, and they say that a family should not be spending more than 10% of their income on water. It should not take them more than 1 hour a day and things like that. And if there are shared sanitation facilities, that should not be shared by more than 2 households. That means for every 2 households, there should be a sanitation facility. So these are some very interesting things. And Sustainable Development Goal 8 is about decent work and economic growth. And how many of the unorganized workers in the ward are not registered? How many don't have? How many are how many self-employed are without work? And how many wage workers are without work? We need to identify those deficits. How many migrant workers are not registered, and how many migrant workers do not have decent housing, and how many 0 to 6-year-old children of migrant workers are not having creches or daycare. And goal number 11, how many households are living in the slums? And this habitat indicator says that you have to identify the number of households where more than 3 persons are living per room. They may be having a pakka house, but if 10 people are living in one room, they need to be spaced out. So those are the norms that we need to follow. And even government, I think even Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, they're building houses with 200 square feet or so. And so the habitat agenda says minimum requirement is 600 square feet per family. And so we need to identify the kind of housing that is non-durable. And also habitat agenda says how many do not have clear title to the land and the house that they have. So all these need to be identified. And so I've taken a lot of time. So this is just a sample that I've given of some of the sustainable development goals. We can expand on it to all the 17 goals at the ward level. So I'm sorry if I took too much time. Thank you for your patience, and thanks for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Kathyayini madam. You've basically opened our eyes to a whole lot of things. In a layman's perspective, planning is largely about maybe some drawings and things, and nobody imagines that it has to do with so many different things. I think largely, according to what you said, if Mission Antodaya can be used as a template,
Yes.
does it have provision for say a dashboard for that panchayat or something like that? Is that how they gather all the data?
I'm not aware of that really.
Okay.
So
Because I'm just extrapolating on what you said, ideally, I think all that information has to be available as a dashboard. So if we replicate it for a ward, we'll potentially need a ward dashboard with all this information available. Of
Yes,
course,
yes, yes.
along with a
Yeah.
lot of other information as well. Uh, and as you're aware, we are starting at probably not just zero, probably minus, because the state of data availability, even on every department, is literally not available. There's absolutely no transparency. And as you have yourself are aware, Section 4 of the RTI Act, which mandates every government department to put out all public information on their websites, is not being followed by almost every government department. So our journey
Yeah.
is quite an uphill
UNDP,
task.
that habitat indicators that I spoke about, it
Yes.
talks about transparency also about the
Yes.
data, and that
Yes.
also has to be an indicator. And whether
Yes.
there are civil society associations, how many are there, are they participating? All those are supposed to be also indicators to decide how well the ward is doing or the Gram Panchayat is doing. So there are
Yes.
several other indicators which we need to borrow from the habitat indicators
Yes.
template.
So we'll quickly try and get in a word from the other panelists. Avinash,
I'll
would you
stop
like to
sharing.
go? Ah,
Yes.
yeah, you can please stop sharing. Avinash, would you like to come in so that I'll be gender equal so that I don't feel we are discriminating against the men. Uh, I'm just joking. Uh, Avinash, you come more from a social space, and I think I'll let you speak first before I ask you anything. Yeah, would you like to take over? And to all the participants, we are sharing the profiles of every panelist in the chat box. You may have a look there, which is why I'm not introducing them formally. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Avinash.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I mean, just a picture to showcase that this is what the concern looks like. And I work with CE, Center for Environment Education, which is a center established by the ministry, and we have been doing activities in the realm of starting with environment education, but education for sustainable development as we progressed, entering into 40 years of work now. Our understanding of, let's say, the SDGs is resembling in kind of this, it's called the wedding cake model by the Stockholm Resilience Center. The Stockholm Resilience Center, there is three layers here. One is, of course, looking at SDGs as biosphere. So the whole lot of discussion which we'll be having today is predominantly in the second layer of things, which is basically the society. And of course, cities being termed or named as engine of growth. Sometimes I also feel that it is the engine without driver, but because there are multiple drivers driving cities and multiple goal driving cities. And in order to describe some of these cities, I typically look at a very crowded ground in a city center where on typical Sunday, multiple children playing cricket game and each focusing on their own game. And I think when I look at cities, I'm reminded of that picture where you're actually focusing on your game, and there is each game has a different rule. And when you look at these 17 goals and several almost 180 indicators, I think even though you try and do your own goal, there is inherent conflict likely to happen with other goals, and therefore we have to be really mindful when we are trying to really think through when we are trying to localize largely the SDG frameworks in given context to city. And then we also, the great thing about this whole discussion is about that we are trying to come to like a sub-city and the ward level. And therefore, from the last presentation, what I feel is a very one important factor for me is really data is in term, not that there's no data. I think people who are engaged at the ward level, both elected representatives as well as bureaucracy and citizens, do have a lot of tacit knowledge. And I think the whole aspect here of visioning will be also linked with somehow this whole tacit knowledge and what is the norm of sustainability there. because that would also determine a lot of aspects of how things in a larger plan, which is actually a land use plan with some color coding to it, would really come into play. And people quickly understand, learn the language of DP, and use the DP to utmost convenience of their individual enlightened or maybe selfish personal goals. So it depends how it unfolds. And the reason I say that from 2 or 3 small experiences, and then we can dwell upon them a little bit more. One is definitely a similar situation like today that's there in Maharashtra. From our municipal elections should have happened, let's say, almost a year and a half ago, by 2022, February 2022. But I mean, due to political situation at the state, there are no elections. And similar situation in 2007 led to a process called participatory budgeting, where municipal commissioner is supposed to present the budget. There is no elected representatives in the office, and the municipal commissioner decided that I will ask citizens to submit their budgets. And that was kind of an opportunity. Sanskriti, Ranjit, the team in currently Parisar, but Janvani, CE took up and really helped facilitate the citizen engagement into the process. And year 2013, we did a quick rapid analysis of what is really happening with participatory budgeting. I think after the proof, one commonality which I clearly see is really a proof initiative was done actually that time in Bangalore. And what happened is, of course, in Pune, the participatory budgeting process continued, and it, in a 2 to 3 years, it got appropriated in a sense that budget head has been developed. The budget head has been published in the formal municipal budget. And here, Mr. Kunal Kumar, who was then municipal commissioner, we were doing a joint reflection of, let's say, a mini public or high quality deliberative process, for which I think Kathyayini was here in Pune. It was clubbed with budget analysis work. But more or less, the idea was to reflect on what is happening with our budgeting process, what is working out well, what needs to be changed, and how you would like to really see the change kind of happening. And a representative form of citizens should be present in the room. And this gives us a lot of learning. And I think Janet, we can see here, she's from Perth University, and Sanskriti Menon, my supervisor, had worked and did a PhD on deliberative democracy with her. This was like a beginning for us to understand how we bring in also a high quality deliberative process into our ongoing work or projects. But the idea remains is, if you want to really ask citizens, and here the notice comes, and it's been coming consistently for last, and the credit to Municipal Corporation Pune, that from 2007, whether you like it or not, there will be a notice in the newspaper that Municipal Corporation is accepting budget. There will be forms, they will be distributed, they are available. However, the life of participatory budgeting is prioritization. And I think in the only first year when the municipal commissioner was driving it and the elected representative was missing, that's the only time the prioritization meeting happened. In our smaller pilot, just during this project, we have done the prioritization, but elected representative kind of didn't like it. And that's a continuous struggle, because I think on one hand, you're dealing with tacit knowledge. On the other hand, you're dealing with grading of citizens, first-class citizens, second-class citizens, citizens without property ownership, citizens with a lot of voices. One research clearly also mentions that when you want to shape the whole aspect of the discourse, it is typically shared, I think, influenced by, let's say, male participants of 20 to 40, 45 years, whose voice usually considered as citizens' voice. So dealing with all of that, the whole learning has been really in this angle that there is a lot of just not localization, but even process of participation is a process which is really, you are trying to repair a plane when it's already in flight, and the goal also remains to safely land it. And therefore, what we also realize that you can't just do simply participatory budgeting. You have to also understand municipal budgets, because that's the way you would like to also then have the deliberation in a way where you're also trying to inform evidence, municipal budget as an evidence to also talk to citizens that if you're asking for a road here, look in the municipal budget. This year it has been already been put in by, let's say, elected representative or a standing committee chairman. So therefore, even though you suggest that it's not going to be much views, it's anyway budgeted. Why don't you do something else? And that is going to take, it's a tall order. You need a lot of human resource. It's a very intensive process. You have to decode and democratize the DP process, because I think there are two parallels in our country: political economy of a cycle of 5 years, and a planning process which is sometime 10 to 20 years. And somehow these two characters do not match. Ideally, one matching factor or one leverage point is the budget, which is one has to really then break your DP into that every year, and that's the way we can progress on really to even achieve what's proposed in the DP. And that's the time when the citizen education aspect came in. And after first year of my work with citizens and with a lot of frustration, uh, 5 lakh is the cap given by the municipal corporation to suggest the budget. And this neighboring municipal corporation implementations would also started 2 years later. And they put a cap of about 10 lakh rupees per work. And that's the time we developed, this was a book, then it was done as a poster, and we called it Menu Card for Livable Neighborhood. And what we simply did is start taking pictures which are like useful things which citizens can suggest in the given budget, and then sit down with the municipal administration, junior engineers, and then ask them that if you want to have a bus stop like this, how much it will cost for a unit cost. So there will be unit cost as the running cost, and then the ideas which we really typically believe that needs to really move into a direction of sustainability uh, are being like try and captured and covered here and placed. Some of them are concept design, like the if you a waste picker wants to really sort the waste, then can she have a collapsible kind of area, collapsible kind of a material which is developed by one of the student from Sweden, so that they can actually do a collapsible stuff and then do their work, because some citizens who are the all are equal, some are more equal. The more equal really wants have a greater claim. The elite capture needs to be worked out, and one has to carefully design your processes so that it's a win-win situation. And this has helped us understanding this, that of course there is a great deal of challenge in terms of what is being stated in the municipal, the district schedule of rate versus private supply. There is almost 40% difference. That if the same unit, if you're buying personally, it is 40% cheaper. So that explains the political economy of what goes into parallel processes at various levels. But you can't really deal with it as a lay citizen just because of there is transparency or right to information. You can use it, but it is a tall order. So therefore, the choice was really to keep engaging with system, but at the same time trying to make little progress. But this was an attempt to really make citizen at least do suggestions which then may have some value, which could be taken up by the municipal administration. We also then found out that third year civil engineer students do have a paper on estimation. So then we approached the College of Engineering, Pune, reached out to their faculty, reached out to the students, and at least 7 other civil engineering colleges, saying that citizens have suggested their works. We would give you orientation and place you to the 15 ward offices. You will learn how to do estimations in a practical way, and the junior engineers will be able to quickly complete the work, because after first years of overwhelming response, junior engineers are also very scared of actually getting more suggestions. So typically corporations will not do a lot of publicity as they did in the first year. So I think it's a game on kind of a process. You have to always engage with the game with whatever resources you have. And mind you, this doesn't fit into a typical project framework, because typically you would have a project, outcome, outreach, this, that, and all. And I think these are programmatic activities which take a little longer. But that's the long story short. The education efforts needs to be in kind of some of these kind of directions. When the same municipal commissioner, Mr. Kunal Kumar, after this meeting, he was not there in Mumbai. He joined us for, like we met him later on. And he had a very interesting question for all of us. He said that for just 40 crore rupees, which we put for citizens, you're putting so much of effort, organizing this kind of an event, a deliberative process. And a standing committee chairman comes, walks into my room and takes about 100 crore saying that I need this work to be done because I'm the standing committee chair. help me with something which is more useful to me to have some logic in the system, because at least in the Maharashtra Municipal Corporation Act, Section 95 gives the authority to the municipal commissioner to present the budget. Section 96 talks about the standing committee approving the same, and then Section 100 gives the general body to approve the municipal budget, and that's the way the cycle happens. About 16 members are there on standing, and the life or the moksha from the elected representative side is to really get into standing committee. What we have typically looked at, that if you get elected in municipal corporation, elected representative may get about 3 to 4 crore rupees to spend in their wards as a overall budget allocation. But if you are a standing committee chairman, you are able to pull in about 100 to 120 crore rupees in your ward. And that's why there is some level of randomness in that budget allocations. But the whole point was that how do you put it to indexing? And therefore, Sanskriti, my supervisor colleague, came up with this terminology, Ward Infrastructure Service and Environment Index. What we did is, and we were also aware that Janagra had done a survey in Bangalore, and they took the survey to municipal administration. They said your data is late. So we didn't want to run into that kind of a challenge. So what we did is we signed an MOU with municipal corporation saying that you would give us the data, we would put in our efforts, and we came up with 4 secular.
Avinash, can you please repeat that? Janagra's data, what did you say was wrong with it?
So municipal administration said this is fake data. We don't know how you came up with this kind of data sets, because your information will be wrong.
Okay, thanks.
So, and then it's like, what do you do in such situations if the administration says that the data is not right? I mean, so there is a whole thing in that. So, and I was aware of that because I'd come for some work there and had interaction with some of the team members there, because it was similar work happening in Pune as well as in Bangalore that time. However, coming back to the scheme, then we came up with this secular indexing, looking at this budgets, something like index where 4 secular index. One is that total number of people, area of the ward, area of informal settlement, and total people in the informal settlements. You get about 67% weightage to that. And 33% weightage could be given to data with pinch of salt of basic infrastructure facilities like the sewage line, the total roads, water supply, which was really available in a far more better quality than I expected with the municipal ward officials. So therefore, at the ward level, you have actually amazing data, to be honest. But that's not for evidence to change. It's rather there are multiple reasons to do it, because who gives you the mandate and what mandate is a question. So therefore, with this WISE index, of course, municipal commissioner presented it just before he moved into smart city mission. But I would say that, of course, elected representatives have their own views on it, but I think media liked it, and then we were trying to really continue this as a process. But I mean, when the individual change in the system, municipal commissioners are very important players in the game, and their attitude towards participation is really critical in shaping what you do at, say, ward level. Because I think working at the ward level is also very important, because the ward officials are predominantly from the municipal cadre, and therefore it's a trust deficit issue as well. Like municipal commissioner coming from IS cadres usually are have their definitely a personality to drive the process, but at the same time they will also do the delegation to a certain extent. And mostly the junior engineers and engineering background people would climb up the stairs to ward office level, and therefore maybe there's an inherent conflict between engineers and architects in a sense, what we have seen in the field in a way that there is a conflict, and there is an interesting thing to be explored as research as well. But this WISE index kind of at least gave us some evidence. I'm going to talk about 2 other things and then I'll stop. At a city scale, the development plan of Pune was done, and then this opportunity came in that, okay, you have to make a bicycle plan of the city of Pune. 2 level of consultative processes were done. With the elected representatives, showing them that, okay, this is the current DP, and if you put the cycle, because there's a great deal of confusion between the PBS system and the bicycle plan. And the great thing was that JNRM has already given about 90 kilometers of cycle tracks, and some of them very, of course, usable. So with that kind of great infrastructure, you could still move on to a transition where you can actually do, let's say, promotion of NMT as a sustainability process, because it's a last mile connectivity, as well as just not recreational cycling, but informal settlement, informal workers predominantly do use bicycle as a mode of transport. And then there are people who are using this mode for almost 30-40 kilometers a day, with the age profile of even 60, 70, 75. So that was really an amazing story. But I mean, the point was that first we had ward office level meetings at each and every ward with a presentation followed by a discussion. The government kind of the terms of the elected representative changed. By the time plan got prepared, we had no set of elected representatives. One more round of consultation was done with them. A plan integration was the critical thing here. And I think thanks to civil society here, I would particularly say that a civil society committee kind of was done. Sanskrit, Ranjit, and I think Harshad Brinkar was the part of the citizens kind of committee, which was instituted through this process on the municipal administration side. There was a proposal we have put in that you should create a bicycle department and it should give an annual report that how many people started bicycling. What it turned out to be, by the over a period of time with the commissioner changes or the priority changes, then it becomes like a cycle club. And I think our struggle as civil society is really gain back that space which has been already claimed as bicycle plan, and keep pushing that you have taken the government money to really made it, but then try and execute it. And then one has to do actually some campaigns to take it forward. But that's another way of engaging and also looking at local level process. The other example of a high quality deliberative process which we're trying at a small city level, Chittoor Tattamangalam near Palakkad district, where I think the development plan was made and already submitted. Citizens were up against it because the road widening proposals were there and they were not quite happy with it. So one of our friends, Malini Krishnagurti, she's a faculty at IIT, she reached out saying that can we do a process? We have gathered a lot of citizen support. And then we did a 3-day process at the Shilpashala in Chittoor, Tattamangalam, where day one was really understanding local citizens and experts talking to each other for a day and going on certain sites on the day one. Day two was actually inviting lay citizens as well, but clarifying their questions and a proposal and counter proposal, including Killa representative, putting for their ideas behind the degree. But day three was, I think, most important for us, where we said that citizens who have spoken so far will have to sit in the gallery. People who can't really afford to even be participating in the process would be in the room that day, and they would actually, the facilitating team would have to present the plans to them. This is what expert is saying, this is what the citizens are saying, and as lead citizens, there is nobody to influence the discussion. You tell us whether this makes sense to you or not. And I think that kind of feedback also gave us some bit of confidence in processes of engaging at a local level, because I think 30,000 to 40,000 is the population here, which turns out to be for Mumbai even a half a ward for that matter, or even like a smaller shakha, so to say, in as the Mumbai logic. So, and with this, I mean, the presentation is of course presented back to the elected representatives as a like a citizens kind of plan. Last thing, in order to localize this kind of handprint actions where we believe that, okay, these are actions which are contributing towards sustainability, is looking at an interdisciplinary group of students coming from engineering, architecture, social science, social work background, working together in a smaller kind of an area to make sense out of these all sustainable development goals. And I think 2 or 3 such experiments we have done with College of Master students of College of Architecture, where the areas assigned to them and they look at SDGs and they look at what does that mean in this context, and they came up with their proposals and ideas. And I think that needs to be done a little more, because I think with the state, state remains very busy with several changed and keep a very dynamic kind of processes, and it completely depends on the permanent politicians, which is really the bureaucrats, that what is there on their priority and on their agenda and what is being told to them to do. So, and it's a tall thing, and I think there are a set of citizens who would anyway fight that, or you have to find out and distribute our works as civil society between amongst ourselves, that who would go and build the cat on one hand, but then there is another process where we have to also do citizen education at various levels. And I think right from school to college to even professional education, there is a great deal of opportunity, and very hopeful that this process would take us a way forward, even though high-level officials will keep on changing. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Avinash. That was very eye-opening that such an activity has actually happened. Could you please clarify, was this happening at every ward level or was it like the entire city? This was in
No,
Nagpur, was it?
no, Pune. This
Pune,
is
Pune.
from 2007 onwards. It has been it's for the entire city, and it both Pune as well as Pimpri-Chinchwad. But I think the critical part, as Kathyayini was mentioning, if you have a facilitating team, you're able to do it. And if you do it in few wards and demonstrate that, like a zero garbage ward or a Nirmal Khatraj kind of a ward where you demonstrate it in a way, all we need is a good, maybe a elected representative who's ready to listen to citizens. I mean, and if they say that, okay, I'm going to do it, there are elected representatives who are quite keen to do that.
So was there any effort, like largely what is being postulated is that every area have a area planning committee, a ward has a ward planning committee consisting of course, citizens,
not in,
civic leaders. Huh?
in Maharashtra, that didn't happen. What has happened in after 74th Amendment, there was ward committee. No,
Okay.
some intelligent guy just added a S to it and called it wards committee. Now, what does that mean? That instead of 144 wards, you have only 14 wards committees. Now, that's the trick one has to really understand, that instead of going at the electoral ward level, they've gone into administrative ward level, which is like a cluster of 10 wards. So, I mean, understand. So, then we put a PIL, there's pending.
So that was a hijacking of the amendment itself.
I mean, there is even not to even have NGO representatives on board. I mean, there is a provision at the wards committee that you can have an NGO representative, and Ranjit, one of our colleagues, like from Parisar director, he happened to be on the committee for 2 years. So even to appointment, it took a lot of campaigning around learned elected representatives to have somebody from a political party. Because for them, the NGO representation on the wards committee is that kind of a feeling which you typically have in ideal sense of a town vending committee kind of thing, na? Or I would say rather कि हम इतना election लड़के यहाँ पर बैठे and you are just like an NGO will come and sit in the decision making process. Somehow that is not looked at as that part. So at the ward level, entry of NGO is typically looked at as a person who ward might have gone to reservation, or a ward might have gone to women representative. So maybe it's a rehabilitation process of anybody and everybody's NGO that way. There is no
So
standard.
this exercise, if I'm not wrong, was happening at the wards committee level. That's about a cluster of 10 wards. Is that how it is going on?
All 15 wards. However,
15.
citizens' voice, 15 wards. Pune has 15 wards.
And what was your experience with the capacity of citizens to interact in this? I mean, not just spatial planning, social planning, environment. What I noticed significantly different in the exercise you've conducted, even though it is not at board level, from Janagra, is that you have used a lot of parameters in the overall framework, which whereas Janagra is a very simple thing. They have a questionnaire. Okay, what do you want in your ward? Somebody will say road, somebody will say street light, something. It is just an aggregation of what people have asked for. So I think the planning, what you've done is far superior. It's actually great, and this is something I think has to be shared with other states, and it could be replicated potentially. But what was the capacity of citizens to adapt? What is their readiness?
So I feel that's the trick. The menu card or the poster I shared with you. See, you need little more granular information. What was my last year's budget in my ward? And it's not in one budget head. It is in 5 budget heads. Because Bhavan ka alag hai, toilet ka alag hai, waste management ka alag hai. So somebody has to compile it together and say that this is the list. And junior engineer at the ward level does have that list, because he deals with the contractor day in, day out. So they have to be also onboarded, and they will come on board only when the municipal commissioner kind of, they quickly see that, okay, municipal commissioner ka priority project hai, so they would come on. So you have to build those alliances, and you have to do a lot of informality processes associated with that. Point remains is there is a list, and there is a list of stuff, and not that always it is corruption. It is also adjustment. Municipal administration always needs an open tender where they can actually use certain, and that's they call it like an emergency tender. And that emergency tender is basically that I'll give you that money for a, let's say, a litigation kind of a road where you are not able to put that concrete, so you put it somewhere else, and I'll pass that. But I need to really solve that problem because it's now in here, because it's sewage related problem. So I mean, there is no contingency plan that's way, I mean, in the system. And then if you put a typical RTI and then go deep dive into it, you say कि तुम corruption कर रहे हो. So I mean, it's just not also that corrupt scenario. It's also the resource planning and I think allocations related challenges which they typically also face. So I think the financial architecture has to be also looked at with the development planning process, and also keeping in mind that with citizens, let's say, see, prioritization, that's why is life in this whole system, because a citizen wants to put a CCTV camera to track whose dog is doing potty on that footpath versus somebody asking for a water connection is a thing which needs to be worked out between citizens.
Also, did you include factors like what Kathyayini madam was talking of, social indicators, employment, living conditions?
Our focus was more or less to really reach out to, there is something called the UCD, Urban Community Development Department. There are some more.
So largely it was infrastructure planning the focus was on.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
participatory budgeting, because budgeting itself is limited to planning, but at the same time, apart from infrastructure, there are other budget heads where, let's say, women and child development, where you can still influence the process. I mean, so
but
it's
all said and done, it's a great first step. I mean, I'm sure this space has to evolve. 30 years, nothing has happened, but you make at least what you guys are doing is a great beginning, and I'm sure it'll evolve into much better things. So, since we haven't gotten our planners to talk today, let's now go to Shreya Pillai. Shreya, are you there? Shreya, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Hi, Shreya. Yeah.
I
The great thing, Shreya, about you is that you're not purely a spatial planner. You're also focused on policy, anthropology, gender, social, and environmental safeguards as well. So, Kathyayini madam will be happy to hear that. And you worked not just locally, you worked with internationally, and you have perspectives and exposure to practices in various parts of the world, UK, USA, etc. And of course, India, where I don't know, your experience must be that nothing much is happening here comparatively. How would you like to come in on this? Number one, let me be honest with you. When I for a large part of my engagements, I used to consider planning to be purely spatial, purely infrastructure. And then over the last few years, as I delve more into the space, I began to understand that planning in a city's context or a village or a country, it's much more than just spatial. But I think spatial is still very important because that's where you map out everything. Therefore, so would you like to come in with your views on how do we fix this issue? Number one, you've seen Kathyayini madam has a wish list. She wants 100 things to be done. And from Avinash's experience, yes, you have a wish list, but this is where we are right now, and we can try some new things. And then there's a big gap for the ideal. What are the ideals? There's participation, public participation. The second is transparency. And I think a whole lot has to do with spatial topography plans, such as wards. Delimitation itself is such a big question. And Avinash says they meddle with the laws. Instead of having a ward, they make a wards committee, which makes it like a zone. So all these challenges, but I'm sure you face a lot more. If you can also briefly say what you've been doing here and say in places abroad, and how you can contrast these experiences, that will also be great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thanks so much, Sandeep. And thank you so much to Avinash and Kathyayini ma'am for presenting what they presented, because that really does give you a snapshot of what is happening in India right now. I don't have a presentation, and I did that purposely because I want to demystify a lot of the planning stuff. And I know, Sandeep, you want me to talk about international stuff, but I'm going to talk about so the last 5 years I've been working in Karnataka on urban water sanitation projects in some small towns across the state. And primarily on the participatory processes. And a lot of that is, you realize when you're on the ground that people don't really understand what you're doing 90% of the time. And that is also because the language that we use is so coded in these, acronyms like DPRs and master plans and dashboards. And So that is problematic from the beginning. So if you're talking, and even just understanding what a ward is, that is your step one. If you're walking, so 90% of, say, government meetings and participatory consultations, we're walking in with and understand, we have the technical knowledge, so we're walking in and telling people, okay, here's your ward. I noticed like I was spending almost 60-70% of my time explaining to people what their ward was. And very often people would be coming from other wards and they would say, but that's not on my, like, why I can't understand what you've drawn. Again, see, the other thing is like a drawing of a map is so complicated for an average person. So I think one of the things is to make it easier for people to, it has to be done in iterations and multiple layers. You go there, you show them a map, explain what a ward is. Firstly, just the understanding what a ward is. The other thing that actually works really well, I noticed, was if you define the ward in terms of financial numbers, that actually immediately makes an impression. So, okay, so how much money do I have for my ward? Technically, and the elected the corporator or the councillor there or the ward councillor there is typically very interested in that thing. So the councillor will try and make sure that people come and understand that. Yes, hijack of that, hijack of the situation can happen, but it's still the first step to understanding. So my way of engaging with, say, a public consultation is define the word, define the money involved in it. Once you have those two steps, people automatically will start finding out for themselves because they are interested in what they want for their wards. I think what Kathyayini ma'am said about the social and economic requirements and those particulars that Avinash also brought out, those things are actually, a lot of them are available with government. Yes, it's not necessarily accessible. So I would be careful about using the word transparency. I don't know, there are different areas, but mostly the government has a lot of this data. And you have to figure out a way to access it. The junior engineers and the engineers usually have a lot, at least for infrastructure, they have a lot of this information. So once you figure out who has it and how you can access it, you can actually go to it because you technically, it's public data. So that then you can start bringing out. I think the capacity building has to be both ways. Right now, at least in Karnataka, we don't really have any. So this is the other thing. You walk into a town, there are no town planners. Technically there's a town planner, but I have engaged primarily with surveyors. They are not planners. They don't understand the macro pictures. They don't understand the concepts, the theoretical frameworks of why you're dealing with a large city or a city. And I'm talking about small towns here. I'm talking about not Bangalore. Bangalore is an aberration in a lot of our country. These big cities, there are only 10 or 12 of them. The vast majority of our country is smaller towns, and I'm talking tier 3 towns, really. So you walk in there, you need to know, there should be a town planner. There are vacancies for that. But almost 60%, 70% of our town planner posts are vacant. After that, the town planner itself has he has nobody to support him. So he's also this very, very, he or she, and mostly they're he's. They're very, very insignificant people. They're brought into the meetings, but they really don't count at all. And so they're considered the engineering core is the critical core. So that's the other part, like the capacity discrepancy, or the power dynamic where the engineers make all the decisions. So all the social, economic, it's a very complicated power structure. And I think that also needs to be explained to people that, okay, so if you have look at look at BBMP. How many people are actually working on environment and social? Very few. The vast majority, they're actually under the engineering core. So do you need a designated, technically, there are actually positions for that. You need a designated person for social. You need a designated person for environment. But then what is the power of that person who's dealing with social and environment? It's typically like last resort. 99% of the time, they don't even know half the issues that are coming up. And I have to say this, they just are overworked. That is also a situation that you see in all municipalities, you see in all corporations, and that is problematic. I think people say, governments don't work. They do. So many of them work really hard, and I work with a lot of, and Avinash and Kathyayini will tell you that they're very hard-working government officials too, but they are overworked and they are dealing with fires all the time. They are not dealing with planned out, laid out processes. 99% of the time, they're just trying to handle situations. And that is, how do you expect anybody to then have this time to think of a process? So, that causes stress, that then causes these situations where 99% of them, they will back down and say, I don't want to deal with the public. And that is the inevitable situation that we deal with. The other thing that I did want to talk about is that, we have in, sorry, Sandeep, what are the other question that you wanted me to answer? I've lost.
Okay, neither do I recall, but I think largely I was talking about how. Okay, even I've forgotten.
Spatial planning.
Spatial, yeah. So that is, yeah. So that is another thing. So many eons ago, I worked with a NGO called EPC in Ahmedabad, and we worked with the government in Chhattisgarh at that point when it was starting off in 2005, 2007. And we went to small towns where, because the town planners, again, they're not really a town planner at that point, but the ICE officer in charge said, these small towns need master plans. What ended up happening is, and we were enthusiastic, we were young and we were very enthusiastic, and we went with our master plans and our drawings. And Avinash will be happy to know that. So a lot of students from from TIS actually organized a lot of our meetings out there, and it was quite interesting. Enthusiasm was great, and people came from all over the district and everything. And over 3 days, we did these town hall meetings, and I realized very fast that we first had to teach people what drawings were. That was something. This yellow kya hai, orange kya hai. 99% of our time we were spending saying yellow hai, this is where you live. And I think one needs to actually make it, one really has to kind of devolve this map making process down to people and understand it. So one of my colleagues, who was a very good sketcher, he actually just sat there and with groups of people, he would just sit and sketch and say, okay, look, this is how your area looks. And it was interesting because then three-dimensional, this view comes up and they're like, okay, now this is how it works. This is how our area works. And then you start talking to people about how they use that space. And so I always remember that as an experiment and say, that may be a way to actually devolve capacity down to actual people, because then they get a sense of what is happening on the ground. Just a map, I think, is a little. So, we've seen it in Bangalore, the CDP development. The maps are put up, the plans are put up. How many responses how many people actually understand what is happening? The people who want to know, and there's, like in Bangalore, it's a lot of real estate speculators and everything. They are the ones who will make the effort to learn and understand. But for the average person, you and me, firstly, okay, where is my input? Secondly, do I have the time? I've got kids, I've got all of this stuff. Do I have time to go there? Those are really basic things that, when you break it down at the ward level, I think the first step is really just demystifying what maps are, demystifying the language of planning, demystifying dashboards. There are enough technical people in public society who will be able to use that and work with that. But you still have to bridge that gap between the expert and the average resident person. I don't know.
Are you saying something?
Sorry?
Were you saying something? Did I cut you off?
No.
Oh, okay.
That's all right.
So from what you're saying, see, I have some significant takeaways from everything you described. One is that data is available. Obviously, government keeps studying, generating data and everything. But as I earlier also mentioned, there is a specific act, the RTI Act. Section 4 of it mandates that the government puts it out electronically to the public.
There isn't a capacity. So the institutions that I worked with, I can tell you officially, there was nobody who would do that. Nobody who understood how to even upload a document. And I'm not joking here.
So there is no lack of capacity. It's just the government has no intent. we have an entire NIC, which the sole purpose of it is to put out websites.
Correct,
And
correct. But
so,
so the thing, this is also thing, like, so a document would be created and it would have to be in the local language. Now, if I'm creating a document which is English and then it's been transferred down, the translation itself was not happening at the local level. So the municipal corporation, the gentleman who's handling it, technically the town planner or the surveyor, can't even understand that document. That is a basic problem at the ground level. So then how is he going to even upload anything, because he can't add to that document, right? He needs somebody from my organization to come down to sit with him and actually add things. Then we can upload it onto the document. So this is also big complicated. And then you say, okay, I'll get an NGO in or I'll get somebody in. Then that's another whole ball game with finances and everything thrown in. So quite a lot of problems in the pipeline.
no, that's an interesting problem you brought up, because see, we have established the topic of this webinar assuming that people need capacity building, that citizens need capacity building. But the more you speak, you're talking of capacity building that's required in government itself, not just
Absolutely.
citizens.
Absolutely.
And there are two primary problems you're talking of there. One is, I think the skilling or employment itself is wrong. You have wrong people for the wrong tasks. You
No,
don't
no,
have
they're
enough
not wrong.
qualified
They're assigned to it because there's nobody else there, no?
Precisely. But I think I've spoken to a planning commission member in Karnataka, and what he said is the bureaucratic rules are so outdated
Yeah.
that the government is not allowed to employ planners, which is why typically in all town planning positions you just have engineers, which is also a question mark that went up when Avinash was talking. He said they went to engineering students to get
Yeah.
voluntary work, and typically engineers don't have the wherewithal to understand what a planner does.
I
They have a
don't
very
say that.
reductionist.
I wouldn't go as far as that. They do. But yeah, you're trained, right?
No,
You're
no.
trained to see
This is
different
my
aspects.
personal
do your
experience.
masters
Isn't it?
after
I'll
engineering,
give
you
you the
can also do your
disclaimer that it
masters
is a personal opinion. I do feel engineers are very reductionist in their approach, and planning kind slightly opens up the perspective, which is why you have urban planners. Otherwise, engineers would do all the jobs of urban planners, right? Or you have more specialized transport planners and such. What I'm assuming is that, well,
No,
there
but
is
Sandeep,
some.
that's what is happening today. No, I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now is it because does the entire country have this problem with
Yes.
bureaucratic rules
Yes.
that you
Very
cannot
much
employ
so.
urban planners? Yeah,
Very
so
much so. At least
that's something that
the
needs to be
states.
addressed.
The states I
All of
worked
us.
in, the states I have worked in, definitely. So at the senior level, at the IAS level, there is great vision and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
The minute you start implementation, that's when the problems start, because you don't have capacity on the ground. And you don't have, like, it's not, and I don't mean it in a negative way.
And it's not only that they don't want it, they are unable to do it because you have outdated rules, employment rules. They're not able to employ the people they want to employ.
Money. There's no
Money as well.
financing. That's the biggest thing. I mean, on one of my projects, we wanted to bring somebody in who understood the city really well and was really good and, was had done. We didn't have the budget. I mean, that was the biggest issue. Just to bring one person in who wasn't charging that much, but we didn't have the budget. So that is a huge issue.
Okay. Now the other, of course, that's funding. That's a totally different dilemma.
Huge.
Yeah. Okay. We don't even have proper budgets and transparency, so I can't even imagine what the money involved is.
So so again, I disagree with you out there. This is, and I'm sure everybody, will agree with here. There is a lot of money right now in government. It's just the way it is structured. So these budgets that are created, say at a city level, they are, and everyone is aware of these statutory problems where you have parastatal organizations which are handling money and they are running infrastructure at some level. So they have different budgets. The city has a different budget. And there's no connection between them. So you've got these little pieces of money that you're trying to cobble together, whereas there are other organizations. So, I mean, in one of my projects, we were doing something, but NHAI was going right through our project, regardless of whether we existed or not, right? So you have to sit back and say, hello, what are you doing? Like, we have this project and you are building a road through our project. But we didn't even know, like, those small things, like you think, acha, but they have the money. They have the money to build it. So it has been approved. It's
the
gone.
parastatals are the ones sitting with money mostly, and they also railroad through the city's development plans. This is a typical problem.
Yeah, so it's just a disconnect between the conversations. If they had the conversations would, and again, this is where it devolves. If you devolve it down to this local level and it goes, if it happened the ideal way, then you wouldn't have this problem, I think.
Yeah, you also brought up two other significant issues. One is that of education, both for, I think, the stakeholders as well as, I think, administration you're talking of. And largely, and I feel this is the problem, you can't suddenly ask somebody to look at a map and figure out what is what. Even if I look at some of the maps, I can't make out what it is. It takes a lot of digging into it. And it's highly specialized, as you rightly put. If we have to deal with this kind of maps and spatial maps, then I think the education should start not here. It should start in school. I'm sure if children are taught to use maps from their 3rd grade or 4th grade all the way till 10th grade, by the time they're out, they will be very comfortable with those maps. Why is that education missing in school is a big question. Has your industry per se lobbied with the education ministry to make it as one of the reforms in, say, national education policy? Potentially, I'm just asking out loud.
By industry, you mean planners?
Yeah, the plan.
I don't think planners. I mean, I don't think we're that all together in one place. In any case, and Smita will say that also, right? We're all over the place ourselves. So,
right, like you have the National Institute of Planners, you have the National Institute.
Yeah, but so many. So you know, the current. So in the ideal world, the way a planner would be is a planner would be actually dealing with socioeconomic, all of the other issues and dealing with. Currently, the way we work in this country, we are primarily working on projects which are techno-bureaucratic and defined by economists and engineers. A lot of us are. And that is how it's structured in this country. And that is where the problems lie. So, you know, a lot of people at the planning level, higher levels of planning, are quite comfortable with that because that's how it's been done for the last 20 years. So, yeah, you've got to break that thought process. And I said, like, what we did with TIS in Chhattisgarh, that was really interesting. Is TIS and Priya and all these people. It was a different way of thinking, a different way of working. You need that. You need to go in and you need to actually reconfigure how you function and you engage with government, you engage with people. I'm not sure. I'm not sure, partly because I've been away for 10 years, so I don't know how many more engagements that is, and maybe Avinash and Kathyayini ma'am will be able to tell you. But I think it's happening to some extent, but it's happening in very small interventions. But yeah, I think it's happening.
Also, to the other issue that you raised, technology, of making things more easy to understand. Can technology help?
So the thing is, this is the thing that I have an issue with. I mean, not an issue. The dashboards are interesting, right? So for the upper middle class Indian or the middle class Indian who has access, who knows how to use a computer and all that, I think that's great. The question I always have is, okay, so somebody who doesn't have a smartphone or somebody who's living in a slum in a city, then how do they access those dashboards? So it demystifies, yes, it demystifies it for a lot of middle class, upper middle class India. I'm not so sure that it demystifies it for people who are living, and we have a large section of our population that is living in slums and does not have access to smartphones and stuff like that. So, or computers or even the internet.
Okay. Now let's quickly.
Yeah, actually, Sandeep, on that.
I was bringing you in, Smita.
No, so it's a pointed question. So I want to just tell you an experience, and Shreya will, because we both teach, right? So we tried this very interesting experiment of storytelling, right? As an alternative to the report and the map making that typically goes out for public opinion. So this was obviously an academic exercise, but storytelling works very well when you're talking to an audience which does not understand maps or in fact know how to read technical documents. So, but that is a skilling of the planner then. Because typically, or the NGO which is working at the grassroots level, communicating between the planner and the citizen. Sorry.
No, actually, Smita, I was coming to you when you started talking. So What you brought up is pertinent. In fact, the questions I had for you is, in fact, first of all, since you and Shreya both teach, and typically, what do you tell your students? Because I'll tell you something simple. I mean, it's very random. I don't have much validation of this, but when I was in Dubai and I spoke to somebody who works with the Regional Transport Authority there, he's a transport planner. And I asked him, how many of you work for the RTA? And he said, we have about 200 planners only in the transport uh, authority. And they have more urban planners in the municipality. So I'm assuming Dubai, a small village, I mean, compared to
Yeah.
our cities, has about 400 or 500 planners. And this is apart from the engineers they have.
Yeah.
So, and then I was asking somebody, how many planners does Bengaluru employ? Bengaluru is like some, I don't know, 10 times larger than Dubai. Now, what the answer I got was literally zero. We have zero planners in our administration, and this is related to multiple things. One is yes, outdated rules. Second is it looks like our politicians and bureaucrats, for them, planning is not even a priority. They seem to enjoy the fact that our cities are going through unplanned growth. So, Smita, what do you tell your students? Like, you come and do this planning course, and after this, are you there, Smita? I don't see
I'm
her.
here. So the first thing we teach them is how do you draw your power
No, no.
as a planner? We draw it from.
Before you answer, I was actually trying to take a humorous take on this.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
do you tell them that, okay, after the course and once you graduate, uh, you will be unemployed, or you'll have to be self-employed, or you'll have to find a job with a private consultant, or you'll have to go abroad? Do they really have potential to work with administration, with public, with the basically with government space?
Very little. So we don't build up hopes at planning colleges. To answer your question, right? So a lot of, I mean, let's look at generationally also. I mean, that's a good question. What do planners do? I mean, for the longest time, planning was happening at 4 or 5 colleges. Now, obviously, it's happening in many more colleges. I think the Niti Aayog put out a paper on planning education, and it mandated many more planners have to come on board, and how many educational institutions have to be there per state, per district, etc. So they've done that, and hopefully we'll see more of planners. But
Smita, we're losing your voice.
Okay, I don't.
Yeah, you're audible now. Yeah, yeah. Is your connection all right? Could you please check your
Yeah, I think
Wi-Fi?
my connection is fine. I think I'm too far from the mic. Okay,
Achha.
maybe this mic is not working.
All right.
So, so planning jobs are few and far between, and there is a sister profession called urban design, for which jobs are even fewer. And in fact, I wanted to make this conversation a little bit about the ward level. And I know that there is a sort of a perception that planning is spatial, etc. Actually, the urban designers will argue with you and say, no, planners don't know anything about spatial planning, because a lot of planning education is sociology, geography, economy, etc., statistics, a lot of extrapolations, because their main job is land allocation. Okay, after you've understood everything, how much land does this particular activity require? Right, so that's the main thing. And then, of course, in understanding, ensuring social equity, ideas of economic prosperity, blah blah blah. So and environment. So all these things become paramount, because the scale, we're talking about a scale of doing something. A scale of planning is usually larger. At the ward level, we're talking about livability, and livability has to do a lot with the experience of space, along with the infrastructure, which you don't see. And that becomes in the realm of urban design. So actually ward level, and what are we talking about at ward level? Let's talk about the area. We're talking about, how much area is that? That's about 250 to 600 acres, right? That is, and if you look at the planning area of Bangalore, for example, that is about 1,200 odd square kilometers, right? So understanding scale is very important. So when you come down in scale from planning to subsidy to ward level, you're really talking about certain aspects becoming more important than others. And livability aspects, which have to do with community spaces, open spaces, social infrastructure. How does it, the experience of space, urban design is very important. So I wanted to speak a little bit about that profession, which is, in fact, no jobs are advertised for urban designers in most states, which is very sad. And while you look at education-wise, many architectural colleges are running masters in architecture programs in urban design. So there's a complete supply-demand. There is a lot of supply. There should be demand, but there is no demand. So just something you should know.
So where do they go? All your graduates? Do they work abroad primarily?
They go for their PhDs, or they work in architectural firms. They try to make those urban design projects. They imagine them as larger projects than they are, things like that, right? So it's not, because urban design projects are very few and far between. I know smart city missions, etc. They've made it a mandate to employ urban designers because that is local area planning. That scale lends itself very well to those skills. So that's where some of them have got jobs recently, right?
Mm-hmm. So can I beseech you to at least make a pitch, or has it already started making a difference? Like I've seen some of the NCERT textbooks, the new ones. Actually, I think second or third standard onwards, they have some sections on maps, understanding maps, studying maps, and stuff like that. So I'm assuming that there's a qualitative improvement in at least those students in understanding maps by the time they reach adulthood. Do you think more such changes have to come in? Because see, eventually democracy is as good as the citizens. So if you're expecting citizens to play a role either in governance or in plannings, the capacity building has to happen. And I think a large part of it has happened during schooling, right? We are investing time on the early growing phase of every citizen. The first 15 to 20 years of their lives, they're sitting in a classroom, and most of what they learn is of absolutely zero use once they become adults. I think about 5 or 10% of what they actually learn is the only useful components of those, unless they pursue a specialization in a field of their choice. Couldn't more such topics like these, which are relevant to how they relate to their immediate environment?
Absolutely. I mean, we have civics, right? We have civics as a subject, at least was when I was studying. So we understood the Panchayati Raj, the municipal, we understood the three tiers of government very well. We understood the whole process per se. Understanding the planning process, which actually impacts our lives so much, it has to be tied in some way. So yes, there is a case for educational reform there.
Please get your Institute of Planners and Institute of Urban Designers
and IUTI to work on. I think that's a very good suggestion. We'll take it. Yeah.
And also, this just in case you have something to say, please finish it. I wanted to bring up something very interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. You were saying something. Would you
no,
like to
I was just talking about. So I had made some notes that I wanted to go through very quickly. So one was about legislation, right?
Yeah.
You asked me, what do we tell our planners? First, we tell them about where they draw their powers from, planning powers from. It's from legislation. And legislation right now is in the form of town planning acts. Town planning acts in most states will have a provision for lower order plans, which is below the master plan. And those local plans can be defined per se by the master plan, right? So if the master plan allows for lower order plans, defines those areas, then there is a statutory provision then for local area plans or ward level plans to be prepared, right? So the framework has to come from the Planning Act and from the master plan. So just to point there, in certain cities, the recent master plans have defined their lower order as they have defined wards, right? Where ward planning can then be taken up. And why have they done that is very important, because the implementation of the master plan requires detailing at a lower order plan, has to be, and monitoring. You can't have monitoring and implementation because that happens at a 1 year, 5 year frequency. And the planning process happens at a 10 year, 15 year frequency. So that is why the lower order plan is something which gets done a little sort of faster, it can take in more feedback, it can feedback to the master plan, etc. So that is something which needs to be taken into account, and something which the citizens and planners both need to understand. The second thing is about the boundaries. Boundaries are very important. We say ward and we think it's the end of our work. What, you know this better than anybody else. Look at the way the ward delimitation has happened in Bangalore. Wards are not neighborhoods. We inhabit neighborhoods, we own neighborhoods, we care for neighborhoods. We don't care for boundaries which don't affect us. So if planning has to be done at ward level, and what level
look at what I'm sharing on the screen.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah,
what they have literally done is this is exactly what I wanted to bring up also. So this is the random ward delimitation that's proposed by the present ward delimitation committee, and these are the existing village boundaries. Okay, so these village boundaries have existed for more than probably 200-300 years. They've remained constant. So you can imagine how the development, the population's spread, the spread of services, everything would have evolved around these boundaries. And then suddenly the city wants to put in boundaries which fragment literally every village. You look at the villages, they've been cut up into different wards. For the life of me, I cannot imagine why they couldn't have just adopted the village boundaries as they were. It would have simplified so many things. The maps, the revenue maps would have remained constant. The panchayat offices could have become the ward offices. You need not have had new infrastructure. A lot of things would have remained constant. Now, literally, what they've done is neighbors become parts of different wards. Families become parts of different
yes.
wards. Government schemes cannot be implemented because a lot of governments take villages as the mapping. So I'm pretty literally clueless as to how our government goes about these exercises.
Yeah, so
and this is what you are referring to, right?
Yeah, exactly. So planning at this ward level with this delimitation map will be that much harder. Your consensus making, your stakeholder assignment, your identification of people who will actually show up for these ward meetings, unlikely. Because you've not taken into account what beyond the budgeting, what else can be done with the ward. The ward can be planned for a better neighborhood or better neighborhoods, right? That's not gone into that as a factor. So if the ward, so again going back, if the ward boundaries have to feed into planning decisions and vice versa, if planning frameworks have to feed into wards, the ward delimitation has to be done extremely sensitively, in a nuanced way, by understanding neighborhoods, villages, etc. A little bit of that time has to go into before defining these. Otherwise, trying to tie up planning with ward level is going to be that much harder for any city where this is an issue.
Interestingly, the ward delimitation committee, as I noticed, they put out about 6 or 7 recommendations on how these wards have to be mapped. Like they have to be cogent, they have to be equidistant, they have to be manageable, they have to be compact. And if you look at what they've done, they violated their own set of regulations. Look at the shapes of these wards. They're elongated. Some of them are U-shaped, some of them are C-shaped. They are neither cogent, they are not equidistant, they are not compact. Some of them are like huge. Look at this,
So
the size of a district.
your smallest ward is, I think, 0.3 square kilometers with a density of something, and then there's absolutely no. If density was a criteria, one would have understood. It has to be sort of equal density, but no, that doesn't seem to be the criteria. So that's an important sort of another note that I had made that I thought we should talk about, because saying ward level planning and achieving ward level planning are completely, you have to ensure that the framework allows for ward level planning. And then we talk about, I just want to talk about what Kathyayini ji said about the data. I was a faculty at SPA planning, and we did a lot of local area planning, ward planning. The maximum amount of time the studio goes in collecting data. Okay, in real life, this doesn't even happen, at least in colleges where every planning college will have this, local area or sub-city level planning as a studio. So you basically go out and you're collecting primary data because you don't have what you were talking about, that data is there, but it's not shared. There is no online data available. So while you have district level handbooks, you have some ward level data coming in, so it makes planning very difficult. And I want to say the same thing about the master plan making process. When they sit down to make this master plans, why are these 4-year-long processes? Because their baseline studies, it takes up 3 years out of that 4 years. Because they don't, where are they collecting the data from? They're also going ahead and doing the primary surveys again. I mean, where is the data? It's not between the parastatals, they're getting some information. The rest, they're sort of creating teams and going on ground collecting the data. Whereas that what data should have existed. So there is, I cannot emphasize, Kathyayini's point is extremely important of creating that data and ward level dashboards. That's all from me. Those were my notes.
Thank you so much, Smita. In fact, I'd like to tell the audience and everybody present here that Kathyayini madam and myself, we are part of an exercise with the Department of Personal and Administrative Reforms. It's called Mahiti Kanaja. It is trying to build dashboards for every department. Since the departments themselves are not disclosing data, there is this particular project. You can find it online. It's called Mahiti Kanaja. They're trying to pull it out of these departments and putting it out into the public. It's a replication of an exercise that happened in Rajasthan. Kathyayini madam, what was the Rajasthan project called?
Jan Suchna portal.
Jan Suchna portal. So Rajasthan has had great success with that portal. Karnataka government is trying to set it up. In fact, we are working with, I think we have a few meetings scheduled to develop a ward dashboard which extracts data from every department, because as you rightly put, there are some 20 parastatals involved in every ward. So, and the city government, which is the BBMP alone, does not play a role, and they have multiple budgets. We're trying to make sure there's a dashboard or consisting of all these departments, their fund outlays for the ward and their plans and stuff like that. But our ultimate challenge, of course, is how to bring together the ward planning committee together. If any of you have any pointers or indicators on that, that will be great. Meanwhile, there's some questions from the audience. There's Suhas who's
wants
asking.
to say something.
I have.
Yeah, please.
No, let's finish that and I'll come back.
Okay, fine. Suhas Kolekar is asking a question. Do you agree there is a lack of interdisciplinary approach in the system? Of course, I think it's a given. Our system still has to grow up. But if somebody wants to address the question, yes. Second, Syed Samir is a question for Smita. What is the difference? What difference does it make between neighborhoods and wards, as you say, around at 250 acres? I'm not too clear on that. Syed, are you meaning that a neighborhood is 250 acres, or I don't know? Smita, would you like to have a go at that question?
Yeah, sure. So a ward typically, I mean, I'm taking an average, like a broad brush stroke, and saying a ward typically would be a square kilometer, right? Roughly, about 100 hectares. So that will typically encapsulate 3 or 4 neighborhoods or localities. Now, localities are defined in a very, socio-cultural way, because people make their own boundaries, how they shop, how they live, how they take their children to school, etc. So they form those boundaries, or how the villages used to conduct their affairs, or how their Abadi area was defined, right? So that is how a neighborhood gets defined. A ward is an administrative exercise where it will be it could be a much larger area. So, and what could happen is that the ward boundaries and neighborhood boundaries will not coincide. And so a neighborhood could get cut in 3 or 4 pieces, and that's what's happening, for example, in the ward that I live in.
Correct. Yeah, I think largely, if any geographic entity has to be well administered, it has to be cohesive, it has to have a sense of identity. the history, the demographics have to be addressed. And I think the borough mapping exercise of, say, London, if I'm not wrong, had a pre-consultative exercise where they went to villages and asked, which ward would you like to be part of? Unlike what is happening here. Here, they are mapping something and then they've put out a public consultation, and we are not even sure if they're going to read any of our public consultation. So, this has been a fairly large and very interesting, getting close to 2 hours. So I'd like to ask all the panelists, would you like to make some final points, after which I think Kirtibai can make his concluding remarks, or would you like to speak first?
No,
Kirtibai?
no, I don't want to make concluding remarks. I just want to speak.
Sure, please.
As a participant, I've been sitting here for the last 2 hours.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, two things. One is this, of course, it's very useful, very, very engaging discussions. We learned a lot. In this connection, I wanted to make very quickly few points. One is this, and I'm sure Avinash knows this, that many, many years ago, many decades ago, Kartikeya Sarabhai and myself used to run a magazine called Ahmedabad Ma, Inside Ahmedabad. It was absolutely India's first city development magazine ever. It was the first ever magazine. And I wrote a very interesting article in that. It was called 55,000 lakh development plan of Auda. And in the same article, there was a very interesting cartoon drawn by Dhan Kakaria, who drew that there was a once man, a small little dhotiwala, trying to look at the development plan, which was hung 100 feet up, and trying to understand what it is. And then, because this was participatory process, the plan was supposed to be participatory. So the point that I'm trying to make very quickly without going in much detail is what Shreya ji is saying, that if we really mean participation, our tools, our methods, our systems, and our procedures are completely wrong. They are just not work. It doesn't allow. The second point that I wanted to make was, then of course, because I've done a fair amount of work on participatory design and participatory planning and participatory development for quite some time, I've been continuously looking what is the one where the system works for everyone. And you'll be very surprised. My finding is this, that this country's election system works very well for everyone. It's amazing how well it works. It works for the common people, it works for rich, it works for women, it works for urban, rural, politicians, just about everyone. And it's obviously not perfect, but it does give a very interesting outcome. It makes decision, it creates government, it creates the whole system. And I think there's so much to learn in terms of when we talk about participation, because it works for the most uneducated to the sophisticated one. And I think it's the second point in terms of that election, I think, and has a lot to teach. The third point, which I think Smitaji made, and of course Shreyaji talked about, I think demystification, is this, that cities just 30, 40 years ago, when, as a matter of fact, National Commission on Urbanization came in the picture in the mid-80s, cities were looked upon primarily as dormitories, as places to live. And therefore, municipal governance was very important. What was very important was water supply and drainage and sewage and conservancy. That is where I think most of the things evolved. But cities now have become very complex entities. They are now talking about engines of economic growth. We're talking about, I think, global presence of the cities. We're talking about investment coming from there. And unfortunately, the planning processes that we have even today are still not dealing with this huge complexities which are evident in making cities. And therefore, I think, you don't have proper planning. You obviously can't have participatory planning. You don't have proper cities because you just don't have the instrumentality. You don't have the skills. You are not really dealing with this large complexity which the cities are. And then my fourth point on this, which is the last one, that we probably made a very difficult mistake. And that is this, that we started talking about bottom-up planning and never developed proper tool, instrumentality, institutions, and understanding and education around it. Because it's a very important thing, because, if I take my hand and take, I think, the top-down view, my hand is very different than what I take a bottom-up view. And when you take bottom-up view or top-down view, development is different, investment is different, implications are different. What it does is very, very different. And therefore, while we were talking about bottom-up and top-down, we never invested enough in developing our understanding and how to go about doing it bottom-up way. And even today, there is a lot of talk about this. There is very little understanding. There is very little knowledge. It is how do you do bottom-up? And I think that is something, Smitaji, needs to be taught at length when it comes to planning. Because I think, even for a long time to come, this country, if it wants to kind of go ahead, if you want to kind of manage our cities well, it's not only, I think, what kind of planning happens at the slum level, but what kind of planning happens across the board. And that is going to require huge amount of understanding of what bottom-up planning is all about, how it works, how could you make it, I think, more efficient and productive. So this is the kind of fourth thing which I thought I'll share very, very quickly in the context of the discussion that's going on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kirti, for those very relevant, I think largely questions. Since we are almost reaching about 2 hours on this webinar, I think we can wind up after a round of concluding remarks. I think largely the question I'd like to put out to every panelist is, how do we set up capacity or the process to arrive at ward planning committees or area, even sub ward committees like area planning committees? What vision or what steps or whatever else can you think of that can enable these in the near or distant future as it evolves? The floor is open to all the panelists. Any of you who wish to speak can please do so.
Can I?
Yeah, please.
So, see, I'm trained planner, designer. I can only talk from that perspective. Obviously, a lot of you have spent a lot more time on the citizen side. We have spent more time the planning side.
So you're saying spatial. You're talking about spatial largely, right?
No, I don't talk. I don't think planning is spatial. I disagree with you. So
you're talking about spatial and social. All right.
No, the problem is the way plans are put up. The land use plan is all you see. You don't see those fat reports which accompany them. Land use plan is just one element of it. So that is the challenge, of course, and everything around the land use plan becomes the system of budgeting, money, etc. So that all our attention goes there. But that's not what it is. I'm talking about the wealth of information which is sitting inside educational institutions right now. A lot, like I said, planning education necessarily has what I wouldn't call it, they call it different things in different colleges, but basically a sub-city or a lower order plan making. This is done across all colleges and they take up different cities, they take up different wards within the same city, etc. And that information, Kathyayini ji was talking about the toolkit for ward planning, right? these are sort of set processes which are put in place, and a wealth of information which exists. And I think initially, like Avinash has done in Pune, maybe depending on educational institutions, which now have, a lot of them have independent consulting arms, would be a good way to start with that. Of course, this doesn't address the question of how to set up ward planning committees. I'm talking about planning capacity, right? How to bring in that planning capacity at a ward level. What planning, how to set up the ward planning committee is going to be challenging. I mean, how do you go about, is there a facilitative counselor? Is there are there enough interested stakeholders? Who will spearhead that? I mean, I think Kathyayini is better suited to answer that. Thanks.
Yeah. Who would like to come in? Kathyayini madam?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, as a last comment, I'd like to say that they're a very long way away from doing ward level planning, actually, because you see, even ward committees are not functioning as they should, and because of the lack of political will. And areas have to be activated, the area sabha has to be activated to do real area level planning. And I think most cities have not even notified the areas where the voters can gather and start, actually doing participatory planning. So I think we need to activate those first, and then the capacity building can happen. There are enough groups actually within the wards, like the self-help groups of women are there, the slum dwellers associations are there, even youth groups are there, women's groups are there, and even children's groups are also there. So we need to bring them all together at the area level and at the ward level, and the capacity building, of course, has to happen. And unfortunately, these things have happened to a larger extent in the gram sabhas, because the politicians somehow are not averse to enabling citizen participation in the gram at the rural level, but they are very averse to having it at the city level or in the urban areas. So I don't know why that is, and we need to break that barrier and really bring more pressure on the politicians to enable citizen participation in the urban areas. Thank you.
Kathyayini madam, how much of that? The question is, yes, this is like a chicken and I don't know if the chicken and egg situation, or the thing is the politicians are going to be averse to any sort of revolution. That's a given. Now, how much can citizen demand bring about change? And I'll cite an example now. In my ward, we have started taking a lot of initiative to control the trajectory of. We've actually set up a website for our ward committee. We've set up a Twitter handle, and the more we start becoming louder, we've realized the officials actually listen to us more than to the politicians or to the other. So, can citizens start taking these initiatives and start driving these changes? Because uh, I don't see what the point of highly literate, highly educated urban political classes if they cannot even drive change. It's about time citizens started taking ownership, don't you think? And you have moved mountains in the last few decades of your civic activism. But don't you think the next generation can actually take more control and drive this change that you're saying is not happening? What do you say?
Definitely, it all depends on the citizens and how much pressure they are able to bring on the elected representatives. And there are several examples of where citizens have taken things into their own hand, like I've met Varsha in Maharashtra, Varsha Vilas, and how they have, even though the law even doesn't allow them to have area sabhas, they have formed informal area sabhas by themselves. And put pressure on their elected representative to listen to them, to attend their meetings and solve their problems. So things are happening where citizens take the initiative, and your Whitefield itself is an example of that. And I think there are several such initiatives happening across the country. We need to learn from them and promote them.
Yeah, I'm
So,
showing off
because
my.
elected representatives will respond only when they see numbers. And because if they see that this many now voters are asking for this, then
Correct.
that is the only way they will respond. Yeah.
I'm just taking this opportunity to show off my ward activity. See, we've set up a shadow ward committee with a Twitter handle, and we've even shared today's event on it. And we've started a campaign to spot violations, which we are going to formally take up with the government. And we actually have a website even, and we list ward committee meetings. This is a simple, I mean, it's not even a high engagement activity. It's a very low engagement activity, but we have got this far. We put out all the ward resources and stuff like that. So it's just a pointer in the direction of what citizens can do if they wish.
Sandeep, you should bring one of the local colleges in for your ward plan.
That's a fantastic idea. Their
You,
planning departments and stuff like that, right?
yeah, any masters in architecture program will happily
Yeah,
do
we
it.
have quite a few colleges here. There's MVG and
Yeah.
some other colleges.
Yeah,
Fantastic. Yeah,
urban design program. They'll happily do it. Yeah.
yeah. So, Avinash, Shreya, would you like to?
Avinash, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, two things. One is key in order to make the participation best out of it. There is a simple law. Is it IDE? Is it inclusive? Is it deliberative? Is it effective? And I think that's the logic we had been following when we are really saying that we want to set up something for citizens, because I think there is no need of actually everybody participating in the DP making process. The point remains is key. The current scenario is that affected parties would give objection and suggestion. So the language of even planning is again colonial in its nature, saying that we have declared this. Do you have objection or suggestion? Tell us that. It's like a no co-creation kind of a thing. So I think language has to get into that co-creation angle. That's number one. Number two, try and build partnership with elected representatives. I think we have really found them very walking a tightrope, because not each one of them is getting elected for third term. I think that one who was elected for the first term, even look at the gender dimensions. I mean, elected representative who have been coming in as a woman representative, it's like is a puppet character where her husband, her son, or maybe her father-in-law is making decision in her name. And then how do I really blame such a woman who just happened to be because was a reservation seat there? So making partnership with elected representatives and asking them one question very clearly from the beginning, that what power you are ready to give up to citizens if we do high quality deliberation or citizen engagement, and you tell us the threshold of that. And if there is a willingness from their end to really give at least some power, for example, I can give, let's say, a budget of, let's say, 10 lakh rupees to be spent. I think then even participatory budgeting is also possible with even a DP overlap on it, because sometimes bureaucracy has this tendency to really always use this gap between the trust deficit between the elected representatives and citizens, and really be ineffective in between the street level bureaucracy, I'm saying. And therefore, I think in my thesis, I called them permanent politicians, because they are the ones who are the gatekeepers for what kind of citizen well-being projects to be governed. Because one has to also read then Patrick Hillier and say that how the cabal city unfolds, and your rent-seeking cabals are really then making best out of cities with the ones who don't have, let's say, even voting rights. Like, what's the view of, let's say, a resident who is a property tax owner towards a street vendor, or towards, let's say, a woman who's even serving their own homes? And I think informal sector is 96% of this country, hardly any provisioning towards their requirements. You have to even go for a bodily function, you have to really ask the owner with a very very apologetic voice, can I use your toilet? So I mean, these are complexities one has to look at in a context there. And apart from that, college, I mean, definitely use the local college, but can you try and set up an interdisciplinary group by saying that we would at least work with as many disciplines as possible and have the orientation? Because I think the discussion going to be hyper local, and then one has to also have a think through process. I'm happy to volunteer on thinking through that, at least in some words, to see how do you really then stick to that inclusion, deliberation, and effectiveness as a small stick to look at. Otherwise, I'm reminded of the Sherry Austin's ladder of participation, that I participate, you participate, and they benefit. So yeah, I mean, we should not get the hand. Also, do not become the tool in the hands of bureaucracy, for sure. Thanks.
I have a very small, and maybe I know Avinash used the word gatekeeper, but this is another gatekeeper that the funding agencies in a lot of this, they actually have in their documents, there are areas which are identified for participation currently, and it's a strong area. So the reality is that it gets diluted by the time it comes down to the local, to the municipality. However, if as a citizen you are aware of that section that is in their policy documents, you can actually go to through their grievance redressal mechanism and identify that. That is an extremely powerful space because they control the money. So I'm just saying that this language is now being used. I mean, especially in the last 10, 15 years, it's being used, and then post-COVID, this whole idea of participation, environmental, social, etc. The language is there. It's how do you leverage it? So the financing organizations are using the language, and they are gatekeepers too. So you might want to use that. You could potentially use that. Just a practical way of dealing with it.
That requires a lot of influence over multiple.
Not really, because their structure, they have independent evaluation sectors, sections. So you
just start tagging them in your committee through social media. You will get it. I mean, not that difficult.
You need to do a training workshop for citizens, and all the audience that I've stuck on. In fact, I'm amazed that most of them have stayed on for this long 2-hour conversation. I think they're very invested in this. So I would recommend that you contact Avinash and Shreya also, who might get, or perhaps potentially we could put together a workshop for all ward. Maybe you can come up with a framework how to set up a ward committee and what process to follow. Can we potentially put out a booklet, Avinash, Shreya?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that'll be great. Over the next few, whenever, according to your convenience, if you can come up with some sort of a guidance on how to set up a ward planning committee or an area planning committee, what all processes to follow, what and like you said, what are the kind of influences to use to facilitate that process, will be great. Smita, would you have any concluding comments as well?
No, nothing. Said everything. Thanks.
So in that case, shall we wind up? It has been like a phenomenal marathon session, and I'm hoping the audience has enjoyed it as well as found it engaging. We still have almost 70 to 80% of the audience we started with sticking on, and that itself is proof that this discussion has proved to be very valuable and useful to all. I thank every one of you panelists for having participated and shared such valuable insights, and I hope the audience can also continue engaging, and please keep giving us information. We've put out a website now, swarajforcities.in, on which we are putting out upcoming events, and also in the archive section you'll find all recordings, all documents that have been shared, all presentations that have been shared in every single program of ours. So you'll find it very useful, and please continue to engage with us. Tell us what you want from our webinar series, our event series, not even a webinar series. It's a lot of things now. Potentially, we can become a movement. Please continue to collaborate with us. Please keep asking us questions, and please keep telling us what you are expecting out of these engagements, and we'll try to incorporate them in all the future upcoming events. The next event is scheduled for, if I'm not wrong, the 12th of next month, 12th of October. Thank you for all those positive comments. Thank you, Manjuna. So yes, please stay tuned to our social media and to our website. You'll find all the information that's required on that. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Once again, thanking all the panelists.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks
Bye.
to all. Thanks to Sandeep.
Thanks, Sandeep. Yes, it's been nice.
Bye.
Thank you, Ujjwala and Himaya, for facilitating the whole process, and thank you, INHAF, for providing this wonderful platform for the series. Thank you, everybody. Good
Yeah,
night.
thanks to
Night.
Kirti also. Thank you.
Yes. Enough is Kirtiji. I mean.
Yeah, INHAF. Kirtibai is INHAF. But Kirtibai is not there. He's left the
Oh, okay.
panel.
Oh,
Right. Thank him specifically.
okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
All
Bye.
right. Thank you so much. Bye.
Okay. Bye, everyone.